Okay, so my name is Michael Motta. I am an immigrant in Turkey. I work in a startup company in Istanbul area. I have had the good fortune to meet Burak a while ago, and I have a lot of experience in starting companies in the United States, some of which have been successful, many of which have not been successful. So Burak asked me to say something about the process that we're here for, is to focus our attention on investors and building our pitches and getting our ideas clear for investment purposes. I have a little presentation that talks about my experience in startups and what you should be paying attention to and what I think is important, and will touch the issues of the investors, which in my view is a secondary matter. But anyway, we'll touch the issues of investors as we go along. So no, that's not what I wanted to show you. I'll show you something else. Okay, good, let's do this. All right, so advice to startup companies. You have to start with great people. It's a silly picture, but it's really important. So you have a team. The team is what matters. As I go through this discussion, we'll talk about what I, in my experience, have found to be important with investors. But that's a side issue. The most important issue is starting a company and the difficult job it is to actually start a company and make a success out of it. You have to start with great people. There's just no question about it. And if there are people here that are starting with only one person, it's generally not a good idea. Very few people. So the great incubator in the United States, Y Combinator, Paul Graham is the founder of that. He's a good guy. And he said, by his statistics, 90% of companies that start with one founder fail. And of the remaining 10%, the ones that succeed, most of them are people that already started a company and had success. So you got to get other people that are dynamic, that are going to add value, that make something happen as part of your company. Investors look for the people first. Just remember that. It's not the ideas, it's the people. We'll talk more about it. So start with great people. You have to make, these are all obvious things. You can go and imagine that this has to be the case, but let's remind ourselves that what's important is that you're making something that customers want. A startup company, an early startup company, such as the things that you're struggling with, are really a sort of laboratory experiment on business model. You're figuring it out. You're trying stuff, you're building prototypes, you're doing things, but really, I'm sorry about my Skype is interrupting the pictures here. You're doing many things, but what you're discovering is what the business model is and who are the customers you're addressing and what it is you're going to be doing. You start off with an idea, and at the end of the process, when you're building a successful company, the idea is typically very different from the thing you start off with. So you have to be, much abused word is agile. You have to be agile in building your model and consider the early work in building a startup company to be an experiment, a laboratory experiment in the business model. Business model meaning where the money's going to come from, what the product is, who the customers are, how you get the customers, all of these fundamental things, the pieces of which can vary, but make something that customers want, which implies that you know who the customers are to begin with. It's very important, obviously. Investors look for teams that know who their customers are. Another obvious thing, your mom, my dad, everybody told me, spend as little money as possible. If you're talking to investors and you have some value in your company, you've made some success, you've gone along, there's valuation in what you're doing that's reasonable, like, the waiters that walk around with the things that you eat, the hors d'oeuvres, as they call them. Take as many as you possibly can fit in your plate, right? Going to an investor, take as much money as you possibly can, but don't spend it. Be stingy about spending it. Don't spend it. Spend it only on things that are essential. Be very careful about how you expend your money. Show in your business plan how you are going to be stingy with spending your money. Most startups fail because they expand too quickly, typically in terms of hiring new people. that's the way it is, okay? So you have to face that fact and be very careful. In a internet-based, internet-driven web application, a commerce application, whatever you want to pick, you know, it's really important that you have a CEO who knows something about the business. And there has to be a CEO. We'll talk about that in a little while. Who knows about the business. But typically in a technical group, it's somebody who has technical competence, who knows how to make stuff that meets the customer's needs, so makes them happy. And you start off with a very small group, and you go through pain with a very small group for a longer period of time so you don't have to spend as much money. Get as much money as it's possible to get, spend it as little as possible, as slowly as possible. You got to, one of the things, now I'm an engineer, I've been in software startups and telecommunications startups and financial services startups, mostly around building products and services for these industries. It's a big mistake to wait and hold back until you have something that you feel is good before you get it into customers' hands, okay? It's really important to make a prototype, make something that makes sense, make something that doesn't crash all the time, obviously, but make something and get it out quickly. You may have a roadmap about how you're going to develop your application. You ought to have a roadmap about how you're going to develop your application. And that's good, but you ought to make the deliverables, the things that are going to be actually produced and in people's hands, with a small enough set of features so you can get them out really quickly. Because that's the process. You're going to get them out, you're going to capture metrics to see how they're being used, you're going to change the stuff, you're going to go through these many iterations as possible to do this. So you got to get it out early. If you wait, even though if there's a beautiful thing that's going to take a while longer to do, don't. Get it out early, make the most minimal set of features. Look to erase things from your roadmap. In fact, that's the best advice I can give. You have all these features, they're on the board, you're at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're arguing with your partners and co-founders about what ought to be in this thing. Take stuff off the board, the planning board. Make it as minimal as possible and make sure the things that you are doing are things that make the customers happy and your targeted customers happy. But get it early and update it frequently. Now, in order to drive the updates, you have to have a reasonable, rational process of driving the updates that you have. So what am I going to do? Oh, that didn't work, so I'm going to do this. Well, you have to have metrics to tell you what did or didn't work. You have to figure out, depending on the kind of service or product or web service or whatever you're providing, you have to gather data that makes sense, a small amount of data that allows you to make decisions about what to do next. We tried this, it's not working. We're stopping this, we're doing something else. That's the best advice I can give is to get something out early, even though it isn't where you think it should be. Get it out anyway with a minimal amount of features that target your customers, and then change it. And develop means to make reasonable decisions about when and how to change it. Okay? Again, in my experience, this is invaluable. What are we doing with web services, with our products? We're trying to make people happy. We're identifying a certain group of people that we're going to make happy, and we're making them happy. We have to, with e-commerce sites, with e-tailing sites, we have to bring people to the sites. So having a way to make people excited about what you're doing is really important. One advice about a web-based web presence is everything has to be on the front page. Not everything, but the most important stuff has to be all right in the first view that you have of your company, of your product, of your service. Most of the important value of that has to be shown in easy, simple ways right on the first page. Most people aren't just going to spend any time unless you grab them. So you have a target market. You're trying to target a certain kind of people with a certain kind of product. You have expertise on your team and a good team to help do that. And you have to make it happen really quickly. As people take the effort to visit your site, you have to grab the viewers immediately. First page, focus your attention, focus your hours and your days of planning on the first page of your website. Most important, in order to make people happy. Then they'll do other things, and that'll make you happy eventually. So here is another important piece of advice. Again, I'm trying to mix together what's important to investors with what's really important for you to build a company. Many startup companies worry much too much about the establishment. Google is going to come and step on us if we do this sort of thing. Google is not the problem, okay? Amazon is not the problem. The big boys and girls are not the problem. The problem is what I poetically refer to as kimchi teams, based on an experience that I had in South Korea. I was selling telecommunications equipment. I went to visit a company who was buying my product, voice over IP infrastructure stuff, the equipment that actually does the voice compression. So we had products in that area. We were visiting this company. We went into basically an apartment building. And we went up to the 21st floor, and we went into this company. On one side of the room, there were 7 people programming. On the other side of the room, there was pizza from 3 days ago. In the middle, there were beds at the other end of the room. And these guys were developing applications for voice over IP, sort of a switch to do, at the time was important, arbitrage of voice minutes for cheap dollars, cheaper than the telco. They were building this, basically this switch to do this stuff. There were 6, 7 guys and girls in this room, and they slept and they worked and they built something and they sold the something that they built to South Korea Telecom, SKT. Okay? That's the company you have to worry about, not Google. Those people, those guys and girls that are starting out just like you, that are moving, that are hungry, that are aggressive, that are spending all of their time doing it. Those are the people you have to stop worrying about Google making a one small step and squashing you. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But don't spend much time worrying about that. Spend time sort of navigating the world to find out if there are any of these. Kimchi, by the way, is a food in South Korea. So it's a popular food in South Korea. So I refer to this as a kimchi team because they eat kimchi and they write code, and then they eat kimchi and they write code, and that's all their day, right? That's their day and their night. And there, by the way, there's no marketing manager, right? Some lady was there. She was good at doing it, so she did it, right? There was no, business director. There are no golf club memberships. There's no, sensitivity training. This is a company really successful. They went off to make a big success in this switch that they built, starting off in an apartment building, living in one room with 7, 8 people, and pizza and kimchi. So those are the guys you have to worry about, not the big boys. So what's the most important thing? Investors will look to this, and you should know this. The most important thing that determines the success of your company is determination, not intelligence. We all think, oh, we're smart, we're going to really be good, and wonderful things are going to happen. Doesn't matter. Yeah, of course, you have to be smart and aggressive and all these things, but determination is what matters, because it's really difficult to pull off, and you have to really want to do it. I was talking to someone on the way here today, and the interesting thing about determination isn't just like running through the brick wall, right? That's not determination. You have to know when to stop and do something else, right? Okay, this thing isn't working out. We've done some measurements. Now we're going to do this. That doesn't say that you're not determined. You're determined to find the right model, okay? You're not determined to go, maybe that's an inappropriate picture, but you're not determined to just walk through the wall at any cost. But you have to have determination because there are lots of difficult things that happen during the process, and you're just going to get through them. Okay, you're going to want to get through them. And it's easier to give up. So you need to have determination. That's the important thing. Sorry to say, and I take a dramatic position on this issue. Of course, what I say is not completely true, but it's good to dramatize important things. Ideas don't matter. Ideas are cheap. We hold on to ideas because they're hard to develop and shape and get the colors right and the perspective right, like baking a painting. It takes a lot of energy to make a good idea, but they're not important. Okay? What's important is the team. What's important is the determination to do it. What's important is that you're mobilized to make something happen. When an investor looks at you, they don't look at the idea. They really don't. Yeah, maybe there's a very special, unusual case where, you know, a guy says, wow, that's totally cool. You know, I didn't think about that and I haven't heard about that. Very, very unusual, okay? Ideas are not important. Don't hold on to them dearly like a life preserver in an ocean. It's the team, it's the motivation, it's trying things out, it's being convinced you can make progress. Of course, you have to have good ideas and expand on them and execute. Execution is much more important. Investors, so part of our theme here, what do investors look for? They look for the people. They don't look for the ideas. They got plenty of ideas. They have ideas dripping all over their desk every day. They got plenty of ideas coming from this way and that way, people wanting this and that amount of money. Ideas are easy and cheap. Okay, it's the team. Can they execute? Are the people good? Great. Are they somehow matched to the problem that they choose to solve? Can they really make it happen? Now, one assumption I make is that for second-time entrepreneurs, ones who had success before in a previous company, it's easier. In fact, it's much easier because now you get by that sort of credibility step with the investor, right? Ideas, we love them. I love them. They're wonderful. They're fun. They like to draw on the board. Don't be too precious with your ideas, both in the sense that they may be wrong and you have to modify them, and in the sense that execution, figuring out how to make it happen is much more important. And investors are looking for that, not the ideas. Plenty of ideas these guys have. So, another mistake in my these are personal experiences that I had that I try to assemble. We have the witch's brew here, is obsession with the competition. You know, spending hours and days and months figuring out, okay, here's what I'm doing. These guys are in this space. What are they doing? I say you have to understand the competition to tailor your model and tune your model. But there's much too much obsession with the competition. In fact, what happens is many companies fail because they allow the competition to define them rather than they defining what they're doing. I'm doing this. Those guys, okay, they're doing that. It's different enough. Let's go forward with this. But you got to know about it. But if you obsess about it, it's deadly. Okay, because it's like the competition is putting a witch's spell on top of you. Don't let them do it. They're going to define you. Don't let the other guys define you. You have to define yourself and take the responsibility for doing that. Okay, so a couple things we're going to wrap up. I'm happy to take questions and make it a lively interchange. It's really important to be optimistic. You have to be optimistic. Doing this is hard. You have to have optimism. You have to get up in the morning after sleeping 2 hours, going to bed 2 hours earlier. You have to get up in the morning. You have to say, okay, baby, we're going forward here. But when you make assumptions, I'll give some examples. When you make assumptions, you must be pessimistic. Okay, I talked to that investor, and he said he was going to call me back 2 weeks ago. He hasn't called me back now. You worry about this stuff. Make the assumption that the investor is not going to call you back. Make the assumption that the company that you're talking to, who is interested maybe in buying your idea or supporting you or giving you money for your idea, make the assumption that it's not going to happen. And try to maintain on top of this an optimism as well. And that's the hard thing to do. That's the really hard thing to do. Be pessimistic about your assumptions. Assume they're not going to happen. And move forward on the basis of not allowing yourself to assume something. And then wonderful things tend to happen when they happen. Okay. Now this thing that managed to get stuck here on the bottom is just a little a parting thought about speaking about myself and my experience with 5, 6 startups. You're going to get frustrated and bad thoughts are going to come into your head about the guy who didn't call you up, and we were talking to this guy who we're trying to hire, but then he never came. You're going to get bad thoughts in your head. I'm not a psychologist, but I think it's really important advice. When you get a bad thought in your head, you haven't got time for bad thoughts because they take up too much energy. You got too much work to do to make your company happen. So when you get a bad thought, label it. Just take 10 milliseconds necessary to say, this is a bad thought. If you just do that, you can get over it and set it away. Just label the bad thought. This is a technique that I use. I'm telling you, you may think I'm crazy. It does really work. You know, that guy, he really screwed me up because he promised to do this. You get this thing in your head, this engine runs where you're tired and you're working hard, and get it out of your head. And the way you do that is by labeling it. Just saying, that's a bad thought, and it's not constructive. Why? Because you have to give yourself the opportunity. No one's going to give you the opportunity. You have to give yourself the opportunity to create your advantage, your unique personal advantage. And if you get bad things and frustration flowing around in your head, it's not going to happen. You're going to get dragged down. And there certainly are a million reasons to be frustrated in doing this. So that's what I have to say. Are there any questions? Investors don't look for ideas, they look for people. They look for people that can execute, people who they think can execute, people who are connected and passionate about the thing that they're doing. And somehow they don't have to bring 10 years of experience being a retailer of jewelry. I was talking to one gentleman about this. They don't have to bring that necessary experience, but they have to bring the ability and the desire to go off and find out the important things to make it happen. Investors look for not ideas, they look for people. They look for people who can execute. They look for people who have the passion in the specific thing that they're doing. That's what they look for. And you have that, you can maintain that and not get yourself down because it's hard work and frustrating and scary and all kinds of stuff. If you can make that happen and get the bad things out, then you'll have a much better chance of success. Sir? So I have experience in a couple things. In the financial services business, and a few partners. So I have a lot of experience in financial services, secure data processing. I was working for a company in Russia who developed probably the first highly secure payment system on the web. And it was a beautiful system. It was before PayPal, but unfortunately the big monster came along and forced us to go in this business. But technologically, and by the way, technology isn't the important thing either. Technologically, they were superior. So on the basis of that experience that I had, I went and started a company for electronic wallets, turning your wallet into a credit card, right? Way back before Square and any of the guys that have had success. We had an idea, and we got off the ground. We got a little seed money, but it was really hard to put together the interested parties in this business space. The interested parties are the telco guys who own the subscribers, who are going to be using this service to deal with money. They want a piece of the money. There are the banks who have to be the clearing houses for these operations. There are the merchants who have to be encouraged to use your system and trustworthy enough to use your. So we were in that space. That was one of the startups. Another startup I did was in the it was in the infrastructure inside the switching office, telecommunications switching office. So your telephone connects back to a thing that's called a mobile switching center. And the mobile switching center at this period when we started was dominated by a few big players, Lucent, Alcatel, Ericsson, those guys, right? And we had a plan. We actually had some intellectual property to break up this big block of functionality called the Mobile Switching Center into pieces that were based on Internet Protocol, IP, that sense of IP. Okay, so we had a startup in that space. We went reasonably far with that, but we had some problems with that. Successful startups, this payment company in Russia. So what were the successes? This payment company, we built this infrastructure. PayPal turned out to dominate the market. All the merchants were doing the deals with PayPal and not with us, okay? We were a Russian company, so there was, all these Russians, that sort of weird stuff. So I don't know if you know Yandex. You know Yandex? Okay? So if you go to Yandex Dengi, which is Yandex Money, that's my company. My company's system is Yandex Dengi. So successful exit we had was Yandex bought us. Bought the whole company, bought the people, bought my team. I was the engineering manager. Bought the team. So that was very successful. We worked hard on that, and that was good. And then even before, so there have been a couple, I can talk to you, I don't know, I'm going to bore everyone with this, but so I've been in software development, services development, at all layers of the stack, and okay, so here is the exciting one. I was in a startup company that was a spin-off of the MIT Media Lab, okay? I'm from Boston, so school. And we built a device. This is cool, so I don't know if anyone's there. We built a device, okay, that when you went to a meeting or an event, some sort of event, you'd go, you'd register, you say, I'm me, I'm doing it. And at the end of the table, you get this device that had been pre-programmed with your stuff that you wear around your neck, okay? And this device did a number of things. This device, when you flipped it up like this, sort of a gesture, a kind of a defining gesture, a branded gesture. When you did this, the device had a screen. It was about this size. And you'd be able to see, oh, in meeting room 7, it used to be meeting room 6, but now, so the plumbing, the infrastructure of the meeting was shown here. You could send messages to other people, discover where people were. We had a location service, a line of sight. So if you use the radio for location, it's not good because the room next to you, if you're sitting next to the wall, is just the same room as the room you're in, right? So we had an optical system. In any case, long story short, when the cool thing was, it was what we were working in, so device-assisted social networking. We don't hear about that anyway. This device talked to other devices, okay? While you're walking around, it's talking. And we built a game infrastructure on top of this thing a long time ago, because before gamification was even a word, okay? We built a game infrastructure where the administrator of the event could set up a game that said, I don't know what football teams everyone likes, but you could say your favorite football team, Beşiktaş or Galatasaray, and they would create a game where the more people you met that liked the same team that you liked, you would get points. Okay, what's the purpose of this? To get people talking. Okay, because when you're at a conference, the sales guys go off in the corner and start doing emails, right? So the event organizers are paying all this money for a beautiful hotel to do this stuff, so they want the people to be talking. So we built games to get interactions, social interactions, physical social interactions happening. And it was a wonderful system. We built the device, literally. We built the device, okay? Why not an iPhone? Why not use an iPhone? Why not use some sort of mobile platform? Well, the problem was, in a room like this, our design goal, maybe not such a good one, but our design goal was, in a room filled with 2,000 people, there was this thing called audience response system. So the speaker could ask a question. How many of you guys like Beşiktaş? I don't know. How many of you guys, whatever. And you could interact with your device, and the votes would be registered within 5 seconds for 2,000 people. You can't do that on Wi-Fi, okay? So we had to build our own device. We built the device, we built the access points, we built the server, gathering all this information. We did all that stuff, and we were going pretty cool, and then the 2008 happened, and we were building these things based upon debt. So debt, venture debt, it's a category of debt. A company that has some reputation is able to get debt, and we did it through a partner, and the kind of debt we had was able to be called in at any time, but we had some goals. So literally from 1 week to the next in the crisis, these guys on this debt, this equity capital company, basically freaked out and said, I'm sorry, we know we just gave you $2 more million on your $7 million, but next week you got to pay us $5 million, okay, right? So we couldn't produce the $5 million and we went bankrupt. So that was to answer your question, that was the last big thing that I was involved in. And then I came to Turkey, and now I'm in telecommunications, network optimization, radio network optimization. Any other questions? So what do you think? I don't have it. Hopefully we'll be able to meet and talk later, and just to get a sense about what's going on. Burak, I'm okay.